A long time has passed. Alara. I was perplexed. My sister Soren and my ex-husband Steve eloped 13 years ago, and I had just ran into each other. I was shopping in a supermarket when it happened in the vegetable area. Nira, my daughter, who doesn't remember having Steve as a father, stood next to me and observed both of us with interest. I made an effort to ignore him and go on. I started to walk away, but Steve grabbed my wrist and held on tight, saying, "Wait, listen to me." Nira kept her perplexed expression on my face as Steve, who was still holding on to my wrist, started to tell me why he had come back to town. To put it briefly, he ran out of money and returned to me, his ex-wife, asking for financial assistance. A sad tale. Well, please release my hand. I take assuming you're still residing at my parents' house with that old man? It's unbelievable to me. You know, we're divorced. He has been supporting us and feels accountable for your allotment. Avoid making fun of him. Anyhow, could you please take the elderly guy and go since Soren and I will now be residing at the house? I stared at Steve as I released his hold. Steve ignored my furious look and joked, "I'll be in touch," before turning to go. Nira gave me a smile after observing his receding shape. "You did it, Mom. Alara is my name." My union with Steve resembled a stipend. Steve's mother had already died away, and our marriage was contingent upon living with his father. We were fortunate to have a child not long after we began our new life. We gave her the name Nira, and as we showered her with love, our lives were full of happiness. Though I was delighted, running away together was never anything to be proud of. We decided to take a trip and left Nira with her grandfather, to whom Nira was quite close, when she turned 3 and things had calmed down a little. It was an uncommon vehicle excursion, and not only Steve went along, but my sister Soren did too. I am quite excited to travel. Steve has such a soothing and easy driving style. With the window open, Soren, seated in the rear seat, grinned broadly. Steve grinned back from behind the wheel. Naturally loving, Soren referred to Steve by his first name and grew quite close to him. I had gone beyond with the travel fees, which Steve paid for in full because she is my dear sister. While strolling around the tourist attractions, Soren and I had a great time joking with Steve. Soren and I rested on a seat to collect our breath, while Steve went to the restroom in a little alleyway off the busy retail area. I'm grateful, Alara. It was intended to be a trip for just the two of you, but you welcomed me along. It's all right. Steve seemed to enjoy you as well. I see. That's fortunate in that case. Soren pulled her long hair back, and I could smell something pleasant. Observing my vacant stare, Soren gave me a soft grin. Are you fond of it? The smell you gave me is my favorite. She opened her suitcase and pulled out a bottle of perfume. Because I was strapped on cash, I had given her a basic birthday present, and fragrance mist. I simply filled a store-bought spray bottle with distilled water, diluting the essential oil I felt would work best for Soren. But Soren had been overjoyed, referring to it as a unique object meant only for her. I'm happy you enjoy it. Alara, you've always had excellent taste. You have always made wise decisions going back a long distance. Looking down, I was a little ashamed. I had no idea Soren felt that way about me. To me, you've always been an inspiration, even though your parents think you turned into a horrible girl. Her statement seemed a little out of place, which alarmed me a little. Perhaps I felt she was going to give her something. Tell me if you ever need assistance. Steve and I will support you no matter what. Soren sprang up as soon as Steve came back, jokingly yanking his arm and telling him to hurry. Since Nira was born, a long period had passed since I had felt such at ease strolling outside. We returned to the hotel after a long day of sightseeing, enjoyed a lovely meal, and promptly fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of the hotel room door opening at approximately 2 a.m. What's going on? From my bed, I saw Steve standing outside the door and inquired. I think he was surprised to see me awake. Uneasy, I stood up and walked over to face him. At what hour did you go? Did you not go out to drink? No, I didn't at all. Tomorrow we have something planned. Just let's get some rest. A smell I recognized came as Steve attempted to push his way past me and into the bedroom. The scent wafted across the little room of the motel. Clearly, it was the aroma of the perfume Soren had been wearing. It was more than simply a little odor from spending the day with her. It was so overpowering, I thought Soren had put on perfume on purpose to alert me to her presence. Am I smelling Soren's fragrance? Have you visited her room? Steve and I both froze, and it felt like time stopped between us. Soren was dozing off in the adjacent room. It seemed suspicious if there was a reason he went to her room, but I didn't want to look into it more. Steve looked at me and said nothing. Then, with an embarrassed look, he scratched his head and said, "No." Well, I wasn't going to follow up on this or ask any more questions. But Steve started talking about his affair with no regret at all, almost with the joy of a child caught in a trick. Steve seemed glad to have finally admitted everything. "See, I said the truth. Please pardon me. I apologize once more." Then he crawled into bed. After a few minutes of stunned silence, I started arranging the vanity's supplies, including brushes and cotton swabs. "Hey, what are you doing?" Steve was shocked and looking at me from the bed. I ignored him, hurled his shoes and clothes at him, and hurried out the door. The stars shone brightly in the sky at 2 a.m. I left the motel with just my wallet and jacket, and Steve didn't follow. I was wondering why I was running, but my only thought was getting away. At night, the previously bustling tourist destination was deserted and silent. I wandered about aimlessly until around dawn, I took a taxi back home. Since then, I haven't seen Soren or Steve. They ran away. My father-in-law was concerned when I returned early in the morning, but little Nira was overjoyed and sprang into my arms. I buried my face in her velvety shoulder as I held her. "Welcome back, Mom." "Welcome back." "Thank you, Nira." It was quite awful, the sweet smell that remained in my nostrils. My sole solace, though, came from cuddling Nira, who smelt somewhat greasy and sweet. It has been 13 years since then. On paper, Steve and I got divorced, but we never got in touch again. Until now, as a single mother, I have been living a serious life with Nira. That is a long time, 13 years. Despite the challenges she has faced, Nira, now 16, has developed into a bright and sincere young woman. She is a pleasure to have as a friend and an excellent student. While Nira and I were out shopping one day, we happened to run into Steve. It's been a while. Unaware that Steve was not her father, Nira observed both of us with interest while we were in the vegetable area of the neighborhood grocery. I made an effort to ignore him and go on. "Hey, Alara." Grabbing Nira's hand, I attempted to exit the store. Nira obeyed and picked up her speed, sensing something was off. "Wait, listen to me." I was perplexed. I had kept the events of the previous 13 years hidden, and I had even been reluctant to bring up Steve's name, much less his existence, in my relationship with Nira. Nira kept giving me a questioning look. Steve started explaining why he had come back to town while he was still holding my wrist. Steve had been a bad financial manager as usual, hopping from job to job. His money ran out, so he went back to his hometown. He smiled amusingly, as if it were someone else's issue. "Please release my hand. Are you still residing at my parents' house with that elderly man? It's unbelievable to me. You know, we're divorced. Your father has been assisting us and took responsibility for your allotment. Avoid making fun of him. Anyhow, could you please take the elderly guy and go since Soren and I will now be residing at the house?" I gave Steve a fierce look as I released his hold. Steve dismissed my anger with a light-hearted, "I'll be in touch," and turned to go. Nira gave me a firm handshake as she watched him go. I had a message on my phone when we came home. I was unaware of how he obtained my number, but it was from Steve, who asked me to leave the residence within a month and included a nice emoji. I could picture Soren staring down at me and Steve grinning smugly. 1 month, I whispered to myself. "What is this?" said Nira, who had been glancing at my phone from behind. I hesitated for a few while before telling her that the man we had met was actually her biological father, and that he was in need of somewhere to stay because he was homeless. Nira grinned broadly and gave a small clap of her hands after hearing the story. "Good job, Mom." "What?" "I mean, that house." Despite myself, I smiled at her comments. My father-in-law Nira and I stayed in that residence for a very long period. With its fading white walls and roof, it exuded dignity and history. I wasn't sure whether it was all in my head, but the house appeared to tilt a little bit. Not having the time to mow the garden, the weeds had taken over, and the daughter plants had extended their tendrils everywhere. The hardwood floor creaked as the front door was opened. Little Nira used to sprint across the floor to make it echo as she made her way to the kitchen after school. We were indigent and unable to purchase many of our desires. However, I still feel something in my chest. I wanted to please Nira and myself so much. It had been a month after my 13-year reunion with Steve. When my phone rang, Steve's name appeared on the screen. I inhaled deeply before responding. "Alara, hello. There is a problem with the home key. Do you not have a home? It has been unoccupied for the past 5 years. I'm unable to open it for you since the real estate business keeps track of the keys." "What are you trying to say? Then where do you now reside?" I silently closed my eyes and refrained from responding to that query. I recalled my father-in-law kneeling low and crying when Steve and I were divorced. He gave financial help and expressed his heartfelt apologies for what his son had done. I didn't have a reliable job at the time, so I started working at the sheet metal plant Dad operated in the neighborhood. Only a small number of people worked there, and the plant was a big company's subcontractor. I tried my best to assist with bookkeeping and sales, because I was unable to perform the strenuous labor of processing iron plates. I never felt like I belonged in that male-dominated industry with its diverse customers. The few young men who worked there looked down on me all the time. My physical prowess and intelligence were lacking. I couldn't work extra because I had Nira to take care of, and I would sometimes clench my teeth in annoyance when one employee, whose face I can't even remember, told me, "After all, you grew up as a spoiled child." I sobbed in private, away from Nira, but I persisted in putting in the most effort and grew my network and business expertise. I wanted to give Nira money to take the place of her absent father. Cash. I want money. I wanted to get Nira whatever she desired, including the clothes and cuisine she enjoyed. I wanted to be a strong mother and smile at Nira, even if it was difficult. The company's management eventually saw a major improvement. In the sheet metal business, I created a system that facilitated accurate processing and speedy delivery. I currently have a prominent position in the organization. I've had a secure financial existence for the past 5 years, and I reside in a 5-star condominium with a concierge. Nira and I had not originally intended to live in such an opulent home. However, after moving in with us, my father-in-law said to me, "Alara, I really appreciate all you've done up to this point. I'm really grateful to you. It's not like I should be appreciative that they hired me after divorcing Steve and being cut off from him." My father-in-law put out a proposition one day. A high-end condominium was planned for the area. He wanted to provide us a unit as a thank you for all of my assistance with the firm and with his personal life. "From now on, you and Nira should live together." "That is excessive. I intend to remain in this house indefinitely." My in-law gave a headshake. I was a little worried about his personal life as he got older. He grinned, figuring I would be worried, and offered to purchase me a separate condo within the same building to reside in. Now, this house is rather ancient. Nira has to feel ashamed. Never fear. I considered the expense of coming-of-age ceremonies and college tuition. I don't worry about my finances. I'm not unhappy with the life we lead right now. Nira probably thinks the same thing. I am aware, I recognize. However, the home was really old. In particular, the outside was in horrible shape, with peeling white paint giving it a horrible appearance. Probably to avoid embarrassing herself, Nira never brought friends home. I ought to have made my decision earlier. I didn't pay enough attention to our daily life since I was too preoccupied with my profession. My father-in-law and I never had an easy ride. The management of the corporation had periods of instability. Employee accidents and client bankruptcies cost us jobs. But no matter how difficult things were, we overcame them as a team, encouraging one another. There was more to our connection than merely employer and employee. We grew close and triumphed over adversity as a team. All right, I would be thrilled to purchase the condo if it were for Nira and me. I'm grateful. Yes, you both have my sincere gratitude. However, I have one requirement. My requirement was that we share a condo instead of living in separate rooms. My proposition startled and perplexed my father-in-law, but I went forward without a second thought. It's wonderful to move into a new, comfortable home, but we are family, so living together is natural. Alara, you are incredibly generous. However, since Nira is fatherless, she needs a grandfather. Please move in with us for Nira's sake. I've always wanted to give back to my father-in-law, who gave Nira and I such much support after Steve left us. Factory management was never simple. He never missed a day of work at the factory, even when severe snowfall required workers to take time off. I can clearly recall him working at the plant by himself. There were instances where the employee's task was too much for them to handle. Even after sending the other workers home, my father-in-law continued to work. He would constantly tell me to spend as much time as possible at home with Nira when I feared that he was working too much. Remain calm. Tell me if you need money. He never failed to support our living arrangement, as he had promised. He also encouraged me to go to Nira's school functions in an effort to prevent her from feeling alone, since she was fatherless. It's going well today. It's just a day for sports. I've never really participated before. Attend Nira's function. Put your job aside. Even though I knew my aging father-in-law was working hard at his job, he never let me see it and always maintained his composure. I watched Nira waving at me with a wide smile during the sports day as she ran hard on the energetic field. I've always wanted to give my father-in-law back for all of his help. He was silent at first at my offer, but then he sighed and rested a kind hand on my shoulder. I may not be able to help you and Nira for very long since I'm becoming older. You've given us more than enough support. It's my turn to lend help now. I might eventually end up becoming a burden for you and Nira. I fixed my gaze on his eyes. Feelings were not expressed. For Nira and myself, he was a priceless and indispensable family member. Please, live with us for Nira's sake. I'm powerless to say no if you bring up Nira. However, she does in fact require her granddad. Alara, you make a fantastic salesperson. I'm grateful. Sincerely, I'm grateful. So my father-in-law Nira and I moved into the opulent condominium and began our new lives. It has been 5 years since then. The ancient house is deserted where we used to spend a lot of time. My father-in-law would sometimes bemoan the fact that no new people had moved in when he would walk by it. It hurt to see the house turn into a ruin, even if a real estate business had been given responsibility for it. Nira was thrilled for Steve when she learned that he intended to go there since she understood how he felt. However, Steve was ignorant of the circumstances. After being abandoned for 5 years, the house had become a complete disaster, with major damage to the roof and walls. We were told by the real estate business that it will be demolished shortly. Hey, do you hear me? This dirty dwelling is unlivable for me. Where does Nira reside? Steve on the other end of the telephone screamed angrily. I gave an explanation of the circumstances. I informed him, without going into details, how much my father-in-law had supported us and how we worked together to expand the business. We also told him that we were now living in a condominium. Steve practically shouted out, "So you're staying with that rich old man for financial gain?" This is absurd. I have rights to the business as his son. I'm going to step in and take command. I pushed the phone away from my ear out of habit since the level was so high. Nearby, my father-in-law snatched the phone from me with a quick glance. We shared an office where we worked. Steve, the reason was that it had been a while. Oh, Dad, why are you there? Anyhow, Alara told me the business had expanded greatly. Am I correct? Please assign me a position. I must get employment. Don't be ridiculous. Even I was taken aback by how harsh the rebuke was. My father-in-law's fists were balled up and his shoulders were shivering with rage. Alara is vice president at this time. The business wouldn't have expanded this far without her. A vice president? Really? Okay, Dad. Would you mind moving in with Soren and me? Living with your biological son would be more convenient for you. Steve, Alara has helped me live my life ever since you vanished. I value her far more than I do you. My true child. My chest warmed at those words. After I broke up with Steve, I was unable to go back home because I felt too guilty about my allotment. I always believed that I was parenting Nira by myself and felt as though I couldn't face my parents. Steve was often reprimanded over the phone by my father-in-law. He described the extent of my suffering after Steve left us, and I had no financial assistance. I wasn't feeling well, but I'm a lot better now. I might not have survived without Alara. You're making this up. I will now be there for you. Together, let's work. Steve, I want to be very clear. You are not welcome here. Please don't call back. He hung up before waiting for Steve to answer. There was just my father-in-law and me in the office. We exchanged a look before laughing out loud. Words weren't necessary. Like a true father and daughter, we had grown closer. It wasn't just me raising Nira. I was really appreciative to have a father that was sincere in his kindness and shared laughter with me. Steve didn't get back to us. No one was concerned about his absence because he had always led a nomadic lifestyle. However, my phone called with an unknown caller ID 3 months later. I was at home as it was my day off. Nira had offered to make lunch, which was rare, so I was sitting on the couch and watched her happily prepare. Hello, do you know who this is? From the phone came a familiar voice. I could never forget the voice of my sister. Upon inquiring, "How are you?" Soren curtly said, "Good." I knew she was down, even though I couldn't see her. Soren said that she had an affair with a married man following her elopement with Steve. His wife just learned about this and filed a lawsuit against her, forcing her to pay a sizable compensation. Alara, I apologize. Although I realize I'm not in a position to ask, will you kindly assist me? I understand your feelings, but I can't help you. Not at all? How about our relationship? You promised to support me no matter what. Yes, in any situation. My dear family is you. However, my family is now much more essential to me. Nira arrived at the table from the kitchen with the exquisitely arranged spaghetti. With a smile, my father-in-law set out forks and beverages. My father-in-law and Nira silently linked hands and began eating the pasta when they saw me on the phone. My stomach began to growl as the room filled with the subtle smell of garlic. I see. Right now there's no easy assistance. You're correct. Alara, you are loved. So, I wanted to be like you. I doubt I'll ever get the full significance of what Soren said. Did Soren have a life similar to mine when she eloped with Steve? What sort of existence is that? To pretend I didn't feel resentment toward Soren for taking Steve away would be a lie. She is still my sister, though. She is my sister, and I want the best for her. My parents informed me that Steve and Soren had separated a few years later. My in-law went into retirement. I was promoted from vice president to president based on his glowing recommendation. It's difficult to be a female president in a field where men predominate. However, the young men who used to work with me at the tiny plant are the ones that support me. I now have a busy yet contented life. Now that I live for work, would my parents, who opposed my allotment and subsequent divorce, accept me? Will they lament my life's journey of several decisions? All the decisions I've made throughout my life have not been mistakes. I hope to take Nira to see my parents someday. Dad, will you give me praise then?